and I will do my best to keep up with notes.
Okay. There we go. Share. Put this in slideshow. All right. Can everyone see? Oh, whoops.
Yep.
I don't need to do that. Okay. So yeah. Well, once again, we've got another one of these in the bag. So first of all, thanks to all of the people that led sessions and to all the participants in sessions. Certainly the ones I've been in this week, I think we're full of, really great ideas, lots of great work. So, let's give ourselves a little bit of a round of applause for, for all of the good work and all of the good thought that all of you have done. So anyway, so thank you all. All right, antitrust code of conduct still in effect. And so we are doing a closing town hall this time. And really sort of, as I mentioned in the opening plenary, the intent is to focus on some of these areas of collaboration, both within LFN as well as with other communities and projects outside of LF networking. So just yet another reminder to register if you have not already. It does make our lives significantly easier. Obviously, people can access this meeting without registration, but it is very important. And then also just a reminder about the event survey. So now that we've completed the event, I think everyone has sort of the information they have to give to us. We do depend on this input. We share it with the programming committee, and we do adjust these events and change them over time based on feedback. So this is a great way to get your voice heard and sort of on the record. And it's a lot easier to have it all sort of collected in one place through the event survey than sort of pulling aside your favorite staff member and sort of telling them, because that's not going to get recorded in the same way. So please fill out the event survey. All right, now with that, let's move into our town hall topic. And so just a reminder with two of the slides on this topic that I presented at the opening plenary on Tuesday. We've had lots of conversations and meetings since then. So just to remind everybody, when we did our ops survey this year, sort of the area that had the most sort of not meeting expectations was sort of around cross collaboration. And I think this is one of our sort of most important areas. I think it's really what the ecosystem and industry is really hoping for from us. So really thought that this merited us taking this time in the town hall. So we've got that, and then also sort of a general summary of the write-in comments, almost all of which, as I mentioned in the opening plenary, did revolve around this collaboration topic. And we saw a couple themes that there was gratitude because there are cross collaboration opportunities. For example, this event where we have switched into having a lot more plenary sessions where we're all engaged on a topic together, to inviting groups like Nefio to be part of this event. Things like 5G Super Blueprint span across projects. Confusion that some projects are actually taking advantage of some of these opportunities. These opportunities are great. Why aren't we leveraging them? And I think maybe that's a conversation that we can have. Frustration over sort of getting maybe the time and attention and engagement from projects that are outside of LFN, where it's clear that there would be benefit to the community and to end users by having this collaboration. And so what can we do to improve our relationship with external communities, and then just sort of, I think, a general dismay that new networking projects are constantly being launched outside of LFN rather than LFN being the default. And this is a topic, and this last one, I think we've heard this loud and clear. this is something that we're kind of discussing at the board level. And I know that the TAC recently made some updates to project induction to sort of help address this issue as well. So I sort of feel as that, I mean, unless there are things that people want to bring up, I think this last one is well noted and underway at attempting to be resolved. And we may even look at bringing in some of the projects that are currently outside of LFN into the fold. So I guess first of all, just any general, I guess, kind of questions on the survey or any of that information. Okay, so I've sort of come up with some questions to maybe help guide and facilitate this conversation. And so sort of my idea was to start with collaboration within LFN, as that might be slightly lower hanging fruit and easier to solve. And so I guess so some of the questions I have, like, what are the obstacles that are preventing you from collaborating with your sister projects? What are there obstacles to collaborating with some of the cross community initiatives like 5G Super Blueprint? In the last presentation, there were some ideas of creating some maybe LFN level SIGs around things like architecture and documentation. And I think sometimes when we have done stuff at the LFN level, it's been a bit fits and starts, that it almost sometimes it might make sense to have stuff at the at the LFN level, but then it's sometimes hard to get participation and collaboration there. And so what are the obstacles, and if that really is sort of a better way for us to go forward on some of those topics, how can we ensure that doing something like taking on some of those suggestions will actually be fruitful and successful. And then there's also sort of a question about, what would meeting or exceeding expectations in collaboration look like for you, right? Because it sometimes, I guess it sometimes feels, at least to me, that there are this sort of, there are these opportunities, but, we aren't necessarily taking advantage of those that are there, which, maybe we need different opportunities, but sort of adding more things to the mix that aren't taken advantage of, won't necessarily help us. So, what would success in this area, I think, look like for all of us? Because we might all have different ideas, or maybe, our ideas are out of alignment with what's possible. And so, that's something we can talk about. And, and just kind of in general, what needs to change, and just sort of the note that LFN staff can't be solely responsible for executing this. This is to help us as a larger community and as a set of projects, and it really needs to be meaningful to the projects, and the projects obviously it will need to be community driven, I think, for anything we do in this area to be successful. So I will stop talking now that I've gone through those questions, but those are some of the questions that I thought were worth asking. Certainly anyone on this call can also propose another one if there's a question they'd like to ask either me or your colleagues and peers in this discussion. So who's going to be brave and chime in first?
Don't call my name, Heather, but here I go. So one thing that I've been working with the 5G Super Blueprint for about 2 years, and with ONAP over 2 years. Something that just pops up is, are we solving industry problem, right? Our consumer, are we aligned with it? And I think the only pipeline for the feedback I see is contributing members in LFN. Whatever they say, we just have to believe that's what the industry wants. There has been a gap in how do we ensure what we're working on, what we produce, is really relevant to the industry at large. When I joined 5G Super Blueprint, I think it was really meant for 5G Super Blueprint. Now with some of the feedback that Magnus provided and we've been hearing from other leaders, as that there's a need for some sort of super blueprint, right? You take a industry vertical and say, this is how elephant software can, get you the capability either end to end or portion of it. Maybe that's something we should be looking forward to having a separate effort where folks can start filling in the gaps for industry verticals. And 5G Super Blueprint is a good example that it was meant for 5G Super Blueprint. I heard from Rainey and some other folks, it's like, well, if you're building a network, it doesn't matter whether the network is for service provider segment of a company or enterprise segment of a company, you're still building a network. So why couldn't it be more product? And I think with these kind of efforts, we might be able to get better engagement and then figure out, how well we fill those gaps. Over.
So we did at one time have an end user advisory group that was chartered by the governing board. It took a little while to get started. When it did get started, we seemed to gather some momentum. I know there's a couple of folks on this call that currently that were previously members of that. But then it just kind of stalled out, and we lost the connection, either in the message that we were providing, or just the value. We saw a lot of attention shift from that to the 5G Super Blueprint at that point. And last year, we actually closed down the end user advisory. Bringing that back is certainly something that we could do, but we need to make sure that if we do it, we're addressing the right thing. I think from at least my personal perspective, gathering the use case input via the 5G Super Blueprint to me seems like the right avenue for that. But as I am not an end user, I'm probably speaking out of line.
Yeah, so I know that we do have some end users here, and I think that's a good sort of observation, because in theory, 5G Super Blueprint especially is meant to be driven by end user concerns. And at various points, we have had end users who have been more active. They're making sure that sort of the people doing the work are hearing from them and sort of giving that feedback. And that's something that has, to a certain extent, dropped off. We don't have a lot of end users sort of saying, oh, yes, that's a great idea, or no, that's not what we're looking for. And so, maybe from hearing from some of the end users on either, we hear, I think certainly at the board level, that a lot of the end users sort of endorse the work because they do feel that the integration, sort of cross projects, does make their lives easier. And, but we're not necessarily getting regular, input from them. So I guess if you're an end user on this call, is there a better way to be gathering your feedback? Like what would be helpful to you? Because I think, to Mudar's point, there's a lot of, I think, good work going on there. But if we're not connecting appropriately to end user needs, then we've got an issue. So end users, let's hear from you. How can help us help your life better?
So I'm wondering if we really have true end users, right? So, my assessment is people who are good at developing software, they're good at their expertise and skills in one segment. They're usually not the people who will be doing a service architecture for an organization. Somebody else maybe architecting a service or capability and going down to detail level as we discussed in our platform disaggregation for ONAP. You may have a different people who make those decisions, and those may be the true end user who are deciding what components need to go in their enterprise capability. And some of them may be in this group, but I don't think we have a good representation because we're very heavy in development side of the organization, not in architecture and operation side of end users.
Well, and just to add to that, for the FIDO community, we have consumers that never even tell us they're consumers. And one of the things we struggle with is actually trying to go find our downstream consumers, because to a large extent, they pick up VPP, they add their own plugin to it, and they go off and deploy it in their products, and we never hear from them.
Yeah, we had set up the use case advisory group within the 5G Super Blueprint with the intent to, as Vidasa said, to define use cases that are important, cross vertical to end users. I'm thinking maybe we might consider how we can reshape or evolve that so that we can potentially reach the the right audience to get the input, because I think the intent. And maybe model it around the end user advisory group type model, if that makes sense, so that we can get get that participation and maybe get that off the ground a little better.
So just
I also suggest if we can encourage the participating organizations to share more of those use story, like China Mobile did with the intent-based networking. Previously, they also, in one of the DTF, they presented how they did slicing and deployments in some regions of China. I think that kind of brings out what do you need. And in both cases, they didn't take wholesale LFN project. They made modifications. That's the kind of feedback we want to hear, how AT&T, Orange, Telstra, Telefonica, these folks are using it. And that could also be from the vendor community. We have large scale communication services and software provider, how they're using open source components. I think bringing those gives us an assessment where a lot of these development efforts may end up and how we can improve or exceed these expectations. And how this could be challenging for anybody to reveal the secret, because this could be competitive advantage how they use open source to build the capabilities in their organization. But
well, we
some-
can. Yes, yeah. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
I think we should find some way to sanitize information that delivers the message without revealing the secret.
And our marketing team is actually very well equipped for that. If you think about things in the context of positioning it with a major retail chain was able to take advantage of LFN technology through these methods, 1, 2, 3. A well-known healthcare provider was able to do something, blah, blah, blah. So sanitizing the content to make that more less specific and more anonymous is something that we can certainly do. I do want to take a moment and touch on what Dave Wallace had brought up. Universally, one of the biggest problems that we have in open source, not just within LFN or the context of our projects, but in general, is knowing who our actual end users really are. Because they can go download the code and and just run with it. I know, for example, looking at Open Daylight, there is a major provider of massive internet game infrastructure that's making use of ODL. And we never hear hide nor hair of that. So we've got issues like that, which are a challenge. That's a nut that we are constantly trying to figure out how to crack. And if anyone has any ideas on how we might be able to do that, we are all ears.
There are some kind of technological tools that can help with that. There's one company, forget the name, a startup company that provides some indirection URL links that you make your software available through, and that way you can collect information about who downloads the software. And it's aimed at creators of open source software just for this purpose of figuring out who's downloading.
So they're tracking source code downloads?
Yeah, basically you can indirect anything through their indirection URLs. I'll need to look up. I had their URL somewhere, but I think you can decide whether you want to provide your download links through them or anything else, and anything you indirect through them has the benefit of collecting that statistics. I'll look it up and share it if I can find it right now.
Sounds good, thanks.
Okay, so I'd like to sort of touch on this question here, which obviously right now, based on sort of the feedback, right now we're meeting few expectations. Is the what was the number one response here? Maybe one of the, kind of getting back to this question, like, what are the expectations? What does success, really look like? Because I think sometimes if we don't know what success is, we end up with a little bit of a spaghetti on the wall approach. So, does anyone here, I mean, especially if you did fill out the survey and you said the expectations are not being met here, what would success look like in this area of inter-project collaboration? Does anyone want to comment on that? Like, what would be a better state than the one that we're in now?
So from the FIDO perspective, one of the things that I recently started to work on, which included the Strong session we had yesterday, is to try to develop an arena where we can actually do use case testing in between projects. And in the Strong case, there's 4 different entities that are working independently that I'm trying to herd the cats and put them together. But we also need a place to actually host the use case test that would allow us to go stand something up that would just run once a week and say, all right, does the latest release code work together still? And so there's costs associated with that. So that's a question I don't have an answer for yet.
So something like if you were doing some integration work with project A, B, and C, you want to sort of basically run releases together on a regular basis to validate that the integration works and remains compatible as code changes are introduced. Am I?
Yep, that's exactly. And
okay.
ideally it would be such you know, with respect to the ONAP presentation that I just watched, you know, you've got these components of ONAP that are together. We have upstream providers that combine them in some unknown manner and test them. Well, it'd be really nice if there were an environment where they could make those tests public and they could be run automatically and be maintained in such a manner that we would be able to identify breakages, you know, in public.
I mean, my feeling is that that is part of what the lab at UNH is intended to enable and provide for. What I don't know, it would be like the amount of effort to get something like that up and running there. And someone feel free to correct me if that's not what it's intended for or not what it's being, you know, used for. You know, or maybe it's oversubscribed and sort of, you know, getting the time to be able to do that. But, you know, that the UNH lab is a sort of LFN level resource that really, I think, is intended to enable, you know, this type of work. It's, you know, it's some of the lab infrastructure that's used for example, 5G super blueprint integration and testing. So, yeah, I mean, I think that might mean getting involved with, you know, maybe we need to pull in Lincoln or something to a conversation like that, because I think that that's, you know, that is a resource that we have provided. If you've got host capabilities, could you take on recording duties?
Yep, I got it.
All right, cool. Thank you. Sorry for that technical blip there. Yeah, and Dave, anyone on staff can get you connected with Lincoln Lavoie at UNH.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, so anything? See, look, we just solved a problem, I think, or I hope. So anything else on intra-LFN collaboration? And, you know, once again, you know, what would meeting and or exceeding expectations sort of in this area of collaboration, like what would be happening differently and what would be the outcomes? I mean, I am kind of pushing on this because, you know, that question, you know, is worded such, you know, I think we need to sometimes maybe have more insight into the expectations itself so that we know, you know, what it means to meet them, and we know what, you know, not meeting them, you know, really means, and what the impact is on all of us.
I would say, Heather, my observation, at least speaking for myself, is that there's not enough time to actually engage in this collaboration. Past few years, mostly it's been through the primary project that I'm working with, like ONF or Blueprint. That gave me opportunity to maybe get engaged with ODL, but it's all the other projects, I have not had the chance or time to get engaged, and that might be the case with majority of our members. But I feel if there was a, you know, industry vertical solution opportunity, that will probably encourage, or in some cases force, to bring people from communities. Example, Super Blueprint. We see the companies who have, or the groups who have contributed software right now. We see Sediment is very active, Equinox is very active, Equinix is very active. We see two other previous sponsors who were still part of the Super Blueprint, Clone and Wave Labs. They're very active. But when you think of Super Blueprint, we don't see a whole lot of people coming from ODL and saying, why don't you use the ODL to build your network, or from CNCF. Some other groups come in and say, can you make this? I think it really comes down to resource commitment and time and type of skill you need for those activities. We're lacking that I think anything, well, that will be equivalent to blueprint type of activities or wider solution level integration or interoperability testing, that will bring people together, because you do want to sort of get that badge that your project outcome is part of a bigger service capability.
Yeah. Good point. And I also, I'm thinking back to something that Dave said as well when he mentioned the cat herding. I think when you start getting larger groups of people across projects, there is a certain element of cat herding involved, which can be challenging and sometimes tedious. And I mean, if there are things, that we can do to sort of make that easier, but I think in some ways, it's a sad fact of the human condition, like I'm not sure that there's a magic bullet, to, sort of make the cat herding A, less necessary, or B, easier to do. But if there are ideas or suggestions there that, David, from your experience of kind of getting some of that cross collaboration and, cat herding, if you have anything, from your perspective that, this would have made it easier, or this would make it easier, or is it, just one of those things, dealing with, and going to Nadasser's point, the overscheduled, busy, people, it just is what it is.
Yeah, I think the latter is the crux of the majority of the problem, is people just don't have enough cycles. They're in general, most open source projects are led by people that are overwhelmed because volunteers are inconsistent at best. But from my vision on this is that if we had a space where we could demonstrate use case stand up and inter-project collaboration, that would be a start, because that would at least be something we could toss into the room if we encounter this in any of our other travels and say, hey, well, there's these projects over here are doing this good stuff and they're working together, and it doesn't cost a ton because the framework's in place, and here's how you go stand up your test environment.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's my nirvana, but maybe I'm just going to drown in that waterfall. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Dave, but I do want to set the expectations that collaboration takes effort from both sides. I think a lot of times when we all say collaboration, what we mean is we want to come talk to some other community, share our bright ideas with them, just have them do what we think is right and walk away from that without committing to anything, to be honest. And that's not how collaboration works. So anybody engaging in collaboration should be prepared for some level of resource investment. I mean, following your proposal, maybe it will be lower level of resource investment, but there needs to be some commitment to resources. Just expecting people to hear our great ideas and then just follow never works that way, unfortunately. I mean,
No, I agree 100%. And, in my vision, this would be, the investment would be trying to make public resource or testing that's being done privately. And so it's really trying to extend the open sourceness into integration testing, right? The open source world has done a pretty good job of doing that based around the shared goals of an individual project. I'm just trying to see if I can find a way for consumers to help us out and help themselves out by having an arena where they can take their internal testing and make it public. And because then that's the open source way. They may get help by other people helping to maintain that test infra. That's really the open source model, is that communities work more effectively together. Is it a nirvana? No. Works better in some cases than other. It certainly helps when you have well-funded commitment for the core of any given project.
Yeah. Okay, so I also want to hit the topic of collaboration, beyond LFN as well, because, that's, that was noted as, sort of another issue. And, it might be, there might be sort of similar challenges, cat herding, getting people involved in projects. But, I want us to sort of also think about that, what do we find are some of the obstacles to collaborating with projects that are, beyond the borders of LFN? Do we have some top priorities that, we want to hit, and what would help, facilitate that? Kind of, as I said, from, just from a staff perspective, we can't, sort of execute the collaboration, but we can definitely help, facilitate, getting it going, so to speak, or facilitating some introductions or things of that nature. But, it might be useful, if we had sort of like at the LFN level kind of, or within projects, like some, top initiatives, like, kind of both like what the technical work is and with which organizations. I mean, I think that the SMO collaboration between, ONAP and, ORAN SG, I think has been reasonably successful. And I think part of it was there was an obvious problem to be solved. It was, also sort of bounded. I think, kind of going back to your sort of, your comment, Rani, that, if we're just kind of talking, oh, we should collaborate because it's good. But I think it's more when, we're like, if NEFIO and ONAP, identify sort of 3 areas where interworking will be of value to end users, then that's a little bit more of a, kind of specific request that then is a little bit easier to manage, and sort of the, I guess, the impacts and fruits of that are a little bit easier to sort of quantify going in terms of why, with, everyone being overwhelmed and overscheduled, taking time to do this cross project work could be helpful. And once again, that, what would meeting or exceeding expectations for collaborating with projects, beyond the scope of LFN look like? And, maybe we can talk about some next steps and action items so that next year, when we do the ops survey, we might have moved the needle and the picture's a little bit rosier.
Yeah, I think that when going to collaborate with other communities, people should think of that as kind of a business development task and prepare some value proposition, because I've witnessed, maybe even I have maybe been a part of it, just going to the nephew community, as you said, and saying, hey, you should collaborate with ONAP because it does end-to-end orchestration, may not sound very attractive to the nephew community. But if we say, hey, we noticed that you're struggling with orchestrating multiple CNFs, and we actually figured out how to do that in ONAP, and we can offload that from the nephew community, then that's a different value proposition that will probably lead to different outcomes.
Yeah, so being more concrete and directed with the value proposition and the actual pitch for collaborative activity.
Yeah, exactly, because we are all busy with our own things, and even if it's the right thing to have an ONAP nephew integration, the nephew community maybe have bigger fish to fry at the moment, or are distracted with other things. But if the ONAP community, for example, I'm just using ONAP as an example. I'm not saying ONAP has missed the mark or anything. Just we need to come up with a clear value proposition to the other community about what's in it for them.
Yeah. because even in open source, everyone is motivated by enlightened self-interest.
Yeah, people are people wherever they are, whether working for a company project or open source. It's just human nature that we're more bothered by our immediate tasks at hand and don't always see the big picture.
Okay, any other comments or feedback here? Sort of feel as though we've heard from a couple people, but yeah, there are lots of folks on the call we haven't heard from. Yeah, does anyone else sort of want to pipe up here, whether it's ideas for how to collaborate outside the LFN or some priorities there, because then that can focus our areas that perhaps for ONAP right now, it really is, sort of getting certain, interworking with Nephew going, and that's, kind of priority number one. And then, we can kind of all swim that direction and put our collective focus there, kind of going back to, not having a ton of initiatives that no one has time to do, but maybe focus, on one or two, things. And maybe that's a discussion, for the ONAP TSC to have, but since we are all kind of together right now, does anyone want to sort of, just brainstorm any ideas or proposals or put some stakes in the ground here? Oh, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Okay, well, it has been quite the intense week, so maybe people are also feeling a little bit brain fogged at this moment. So, I guess to kind of, sort of conclude the town hall, is there anything else anyone wants to say about this topic? Or, what are some action items that we might want to take? Or does some of it require going back to our individual projects and saying, what are our top priorities for collaboration with other projects? And that's something that needs to maybe happen with the TSCs, and then maybe we come back and have this as a maybe a TAC topic at one point, of projects sort of saying where they'd like to collaborate, and we can sort of collect that there in a sort of pan LFN exercise. All right, well, so so folks are being quiet. It's a little bit like crickets, but I will sort of take that as either we are all tired after such an engaged and thoughtful week, and or we might want to think through this further. But given that this was, I think, an area where there was the sort of, I think, kind of the least positive, but also, sort of feedback out of, all the areas on the ops survey, I think this is something we do need to focus on. And also, I think it is one of our, it's something that's important for us. And I think, it really has the opportunity to be one of our core strengths that we as LFN are particularly good at collaborating. I mean, it's sort of one of the three pillars of our marketing messaging is that we are a center of gravity for collaboration in the networking space. And I think that, we need to sort of move from that kind of aspirational marketing message to really ensuring that it's true and that we're delivering the value for our stakeholders. So with that, why is this not working? There we go. Just another reminder to save the date. We'll make an official announcement once the contract has been completed and signed. But just a reminder that we have the opportunity to see each other actually face to face November 13th through 16th in Budapest, Hungary. So once we get the contract signed, we'll get the reg site up, we'll get all the logistics information posted, we'll make a formal announcement. So that will all happen. But, I know that, with travel restrictions and everything else, doing these virtual face-to-face, I think we get as much work done as possible there. But I think we also all know, and we've heard this feedback directly from all of you, that there's no substitute for being able to, interact in person. So, so we're going to provide that. In fact, there were a couple times, throughout the week that I was like, oh, I wish I had the opportunity to carry on this conversation over tea break and, drag in 3 more people into it that I know are there. And those are just, those sort of hallway continuing conversations that are just really, great to have in person. So I really hope that all of you will be able to make it. We will have, once we make the formal announcement, we'll have that convince your boss resource that we've started providing on a more regular basis. And more information coming soon, but looking forward to seeing all of you live and in the flesh later this year. So if there is nothing else that anyone wants to bring up, I'll just sort of pause and see, is there anything else that anyone wants to say about the DNTF or about collaboration or about any topic? All right, well, with that, I think we can officially close our June virtual developer and testing forum event. Once again, thanks to everybody. Thanks to all of you for your participation, your ideas, your collaboration, your engagement. I thought that there were many, many, many great sessions. And I know that, as we were discussing, that doesn't happen without work. It doesn't happen without effort. It doesn't happen without the community. So, I really love seeing all of us come together. These events are my favorite thing of the year. And, especially when we get to do it in person, interacting with all of you in the community is the part of my job that gets me the happiest and makes me the most excited. And that is down to all of you being such great, thoughtful, smart, engaged, collaborative, and kind individuals. So, I personally and professionally thank all of you for that.
Well, thank you, Heather, and thanks to all the rest of the LFN staff who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to get this set up and run. It was an excellent event. Well
Awesome.
done.
Thank you for the feedback. All right. Well, with that, go and enjoy the rest of your day, evening, whatever it might be in your specific time zone. And we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Thank
Bye.
you.